Life processes. Topic: transportation. Students, in my previous video, I had discussed till blood pressure. Today, I am going to discuss about blood vessels and the lymphatic system, under which I will be discussing about how lymph is formed and what are the functions of lymph. The circulatory system comprises of heart, the blood vessels. You can see here in this figure there are red and blue lines. So these represents the blood vessels and the blood. In my previous video I had discussed about the structure and working of heart, and a briefing about blood was given to you. In this video we will be learning about the various types of blood vessels. Now first let us know what are blood vessels. Blood vessels are the components of circulatory system that transports blood throughout the body. These blood vessels in this figure, as stated, that there are these red and the blue lines or the tubular structures. They are the ones which are called as blood vessels, and through these blood vessels the blood flows. The blood contains blood cells, there is plasma present, and the role of blood, as already discussed, that the blood transports nutrient and oxygen to different parts of the body, and also takes the waste materials, carbon dioxide, from the tissues to the region of elimination. Blood vessels are of three types. They are the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. Now, arteries are the blood vessels which carry blood from the heart. The arteries are the blood vessels which carry blood from the heart to different parts of the body. They are called as arteries. Whereas veins are the blood vessels which collect blood from different parts of the body and take it to the heart. Okay, so this is the main difference between artery and vein. Arteries, they collect blood from the heart and they take the blood from the heart to the different parts of the body, whereas the veins are the blood vessels which collect blood from different parts of the body and takes it to the heart, right? Apart from arteries and veins, you also find there are capillaries also present. So how are these capillaries formed? When this blood from the heart is brought to the is taken by the artery, and the artery reaches a particular organ, in that organ the artery will divide into branches. Look here, there are many branches, so each artery will divide into branches. These branches that you see, they are called as arterioles. Okay, so these are called as arterioles. These arterioles in the organ or the tissue will further branch into fine branches or finest blood vessels, which are called as capillaries. So every tissue will be having a network of capillary. And finally, how this blood is taken away from these tissues is that the capillaries will finally join again. You can see here these capillaries, they join again and they form larger vessels which are called as venules. These larger vessels are called as the venules, and these venules finally join the vein, and it is the vein which takes blood, collects blood from the body parts and take it to the heart, from where this blood which is taken to the lungs for oxygenation. So arteries, they take the blood to the organs or takes the blood from away from the heart, whereas veins brings the blood towards the heart, and capillaries are the blood vessels which connect the artery to the veins. They are present in the form of a network in the different tissues. There are other differences between these different types of blood vessels. So let us have a look at that also. Now this diagram shows that clearly shows the other differences between the two kinds of blood vessels, or those different types of blood vessels. First, the arteries. When you see, like if this is a cross section of this one is a cross section of an artery. So in an artery, what you find is that arteries, they are thick wall. You just see the thickness of the wall. The thickness of the wall of artery is greater than that of the veins. So arteries, they have thick and highly elastic wall. The wall of artery is thick and elastic. And can you just think of that, why is it thick and elastic? It is because when blood flows through the artery, it will always flow with the pressure, because when you have learned that when the ventricles contract, they pump blood into the artery through the aorta. So blood always flows with the pressure, and as the blood flows with the pressure, the arteries have to withstand that pressure, and so the arteries always have thick and elastic wall. Whereas the veins, their role is to just collect the blood from different parts of the body and get it to the heart. And because of this, the veins, as the blood flows slowly through the veins have thinner wall. The wall of the vein is quite thin. Veins have thin wall, right? Other thing that you find is that in case of veins, because the blood has to go slowly and smoothly to the heart, in case of vein you find there are flap like structures. You see here, there are flap like structures present in the veins, which are called as valves. And try to recall, I have already discussed that the role of valve is to prevent backward flow of blood. Valves prevent backward flow of blood. Okay, that is the role of valve. So the veins, they have valves or flap like structures, and these valves will allow the blood only to flow towards heart, but will prevent the backward flow of blood. Whereas arteries, they do not have any valves. You don't find any valves in case of artery. Valves are absent in arteries, right? And so these are the basic differences. One more very important thing is that as these arteries, most of the arteries, they carry oxygenated blood. They carry oxygenated blood, that is the blood which is rich in oxygen. There is definitely an exception, that's the pulmonary artery, the artery which carries blood from the heart to the lung. That artery carries deoxygenated blood, but rest of the arteries, they carry oxygenated blood. Whereas the veins, because they are collecting blood from different body tissues and getting to the heart, the blood that is carried by the vein is deoxygenated. So veins, they carry deoxygenated blood, okay, except the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein is the one which is collecting blood from the lungs and getting to the heart. There are some of the differences that you find between arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries, as I've just now said you, they have a thick and elastic wall. Why thick and elastic wall? Because they have to withstand the pressure of that is exerted by blood as the blood flows through the arteries. Veins, they have got wall which is thin and less elastic. But since the arteries have got thick wall, as the wall is thick, the central cavity, that is the lumen, the cavity through which the blood flows, that is smaller in case of arteries. Whereas in case of vein, the lumen or the cavity through which the blood flows, that is quite wider or larger. Other thing that you find in case of vein is that veins have valves, whereas arteries, they lack valves. And what about the capillaries? The capillaries, they are the blood vessels which are very thin. They are the finest blood vessels. These capillaries, the capillaries are the finest blood vessels which are present in our body. The wall of the capillary is just made up of one layer of cell. Here the arteries, I said you, they are thick wall, and their wall will be having muscles also. The veins, they have thinner wall which has muscles and other epithelial lining and all. Whereas the this capillary wall is just made up of one layer of simple squamous epithelium. About this you had learned in class 9. So just single layer of epithelial tissue lines the capillary. So arteries, they carry blood from the heart to rest part of the body. Veins collect the blood from different parts of the body and get it to the heart, whereas the capillaries connect the arteries to the veins. I just now told you the arteries will divide into branches, and they will finally divide and form a network of capillary which further joins, and then veins are formed. So capillaries, they connect the arteries to the veins. Other difference between the arteries, veins and capillaries, that The arteries, they carry oxygenated blood, except the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood, but other arteries carry oxygenated blood. Veins, on the other hand, carries deoxygenated blood. Okay, except the pulmonary vein. That vein, pulmonary vein, is a vein which collects the blood from the lungs and get it to the heart. So except pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood, rest of the veins, they carry deoxygenated blood. Whereas capillaries, they carry both oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. What does it mean? When the blood enters the capillary, okay, when the blood will enter the capillary from the artery, it will be oxygenated, but as it joins the vein, the blood gets deoxygenated. So when the blood flows through the capillaries, the blood which will be oxygenated will turn into deoxygenated. Other thing that you find is that through the arteries, the blood flows with a high pressure, and because of this, the arteries have thicker walls. Veins, as the blood flows with a low pressure, you find that the veins have thinner wall. Whereas in case of capillaries, the wall of the capillary is just made up of one layer of cell. Okay, and this is because of this reason, that the wall of the capillary is just made of a single layer of cell. The exchange of material between the blood and the tissue is possible only through the capillaries. Other difference that you see is the blood flows with a high speed, okay, with a high speed and high pressure through the arteries. The flow of blood through the vein is slow, and through the capillary it is extremely slow, very slow. So blood flows very slowly through the capillary. Another difference between arteries, veins and capillaries is that arteries are deep seated. They are present deep inside the body. Okay. Veins are superficial. You can see the veins just beneath the skin. Whereas capillaries, they form a network in the tissues. So these are the differences between arteries, veins and capillaries. This is a picture diagrams that are showing the role of capillary. I have told you that capillaries are the finest blood vessels which are present in our body. As just have a look at this picture, you find that the arteries, when they reach the tissue, they will branch off into arterioles, and arterioles will further branch off. You can see the branches, so they further branch off into capillaries. Then capillaries will join, and then they form the venules, and venules then finally join the vein. So blood from heart is taken by the artery to the organs, where exchange of materials will occur through the capillaries, and then all these capillaries join and they will get the deoxygenated blood with waste materials. These things finally they are taken to the veins, and from the veins they are taken to the heart. Okay, so this is how the capillaries, and all over the body you find a network of capillary present. If you get a small cut, it is not an artery or a vein that gets cut, it is actually the capillary, and they are very fine. The thickness of capillary, if we have to compare, if you take 10 capillaries together, then that will be the thickness of, like that we can be compared with the thickness of your one hair strand. So 10 capillaries together will give the thickness of one hair strand. So these are the finest blood vessels which are present in our body, and this property of capillary helps the exchange of material to take place. So have a look at this picture. As the wall of the capillary is just made up of one layer of cell, this is just one layer of simple squamous epithelium, you find all exchange of material taking place only through the capillary wall. So in the tissue region, where cells are present, as the blood passes through the capillary, oxygen, then you have got the nutrients and other requirements will diffuse out into the tissue region, and from the tissue region carbon dioxide and waste material will diffuse into the capillary. So all these exchanges will occur only through the capillaries. It is neither through the arteries nor through the veins. It's only through the wall of capillary. Blood vessels, they carry blood throughout the body, but many a times what happens is that due to some kind of injury you may get a cut, and when you get a cut the blood oozes out, it starts bleeding, and if there is excessive loss of blood from this, like from the body, if there is excess loss of blood from the body, in that case the loss of body fluids or loss of blood may be life threatening also, because when there is a loss of blood the pressure of the blood will reduce, and this can be life threatening to the individual or the person. So thanks that this does not happen, because our blood has got an important component which is called as the platelet. Okay, so these platelets, they help in clotting of the blood. Like if there is a cut, if you get a cut in a particular region, when you get a cut, it is actually a blood vessel which gets cut, and so blood oozes out. So as the blood oozes out, when the blood comes out, look here, have a look at this diagram. As the blood comes out, you find that the platelets also in the blood will come out in the region, and these platelets will start a multiple step reaction, and because a chain of reaction starts, and because of that a hard mass is formed at the region of the cut, and this mass that is formed is called as this plug that is formed is called as a blood clot. Okay, so because of this clotting the blood does not ooze much, and the body fluids content and pressure is maintained in our body. Apart from this blood vascular system about which I have just now discussed, our body also has got another type of transporting system which is called as the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system comprises of lymph vessels, lymph organs, and there is a fluid that flows through this lymph vessels, lymph organs and tissue, that is called as the lymph. Okay, so this liquid or the fluid, like how through the blood vessels the fluid that flows is called as blood, so the fluid or the liquid that flows through the lymph vessel is called as the lymph. Now what is lymph? Lymph is a slight yellow colored fluid connective tissue which has the same composition as that of the blood, but it lacks the blood cells and certain plasma proteins. To know more about it, let us first now learn about how lymph is formed. Let's have a closer look at the tissue region. I have told you that in the tissue region, when the arteries reach the tissues, there they branch off. Just have a look at these red lines. This is the artery. Okay, so when it reaches the tissue, it branches off into arterioles. Okay, these are the arterioles that finally branch off and form capillaries. You can see this is a network of capillary that you find. Okay, and then finally the capillaries join and form the veins. Now in the tissue region there is a network of blood capillary present, but apart from blood capillary you also find that in the same area you will find another kind of capillary present in the tissue region, which is called as the lymph capillary. Just see, have a look at these green lines. These are the lymph capillaries. These green lines that you see, they are the lymph capillaries. Right, now the difference between a lymph capillary and a blood capillary. Okay, let us see what is the difference between a blood capillary and the lymph capillary. Now the blood capillary, on one side it's connected to the artery, and the other side the blood capillary is connected to the vein, whereas in case of lymph capillaries, the lymph capillaries, they have a blind ending in the tissue region. So in the tissue region you find the lymph capillaries, they have a blind ending. Okay, and the other side, these lymph capillaries, they are connected to larger vessels which are called as the lymph vessels. So blood capillary, They are connected on both sides. One side they are connected to arteries, the other side, and after forming the network of capillaries, the other side they are connected to the veins. But lymph capillaries in the tissue region have a blind ending. Here you find there is a blind ending present. They end blindly in the tissue region, and the other side, the lymph capillaries, they are connected to blood vessels. Now the diagram that you see here, that shows how this blood and the lymph circulates in our body. Just have a look at this region. Here you find that the lymph capillaries, just now I have said you, in the tissue region you find both blood capillaries and the lymph capillaries. Now these lymph capillaries that you see, they join the larger vessels which are called as the lymph vessels. So the lymph, which is a fluid that flows through these lymph capillaries, they will be flowing through the lymph vessels, and finally all these lymph vessels that you see, they will finally join. They join, ultimately they are going to join the blood vessel. Okay, so in the right side of the heart, to a major vein which is present, all the lymphatic vessels or lymph vessels which carry the lymph finally joins the blood vessel or the major vein, which is called as the subclavian vein. This means that whatever is carried by the lymph vessels and the lymph capillary is finally poured into the venous blood or the blood that moves in the veins. This diagram that you see, this shows how this exchange of material occurs in the tissue region. So this is one portion of this network of blood capillary, and the lymph capillary is expanded over here. And now let us see how this exchange of material occurs and how this lymph is formed. Now have a closer look at this diagram. In this diagram you find this is a blood capillary. The vessel that you see here is a blood capillary, and the blood capillary is present in the tissue region. So these are the tissue cells. These cells that you see, they are the tissue cells. And just now I have said you that where you find a blood capillary, next to it you will always find lymph capillary. Blood capillary on one side is connected to artery, the other side it is connected to the vein, whereas lymph capillaries, they have got blind ending in the tissue region, and the other side these lymph capillaries are connected to lymph vessels. As the blood flows through the capillary slowly and smoothly, I said you that the capillaries are ideal site for all the exchange of materials. So as the blood flows slowly and smoothly through the capillary, the plasma with some of the smaller molecules will come out of the holes or the pores which are present in the capillary. Okay, so through these holes that are present, the plasma comes out, okay, and fill up the spaces which are present in the tissue region. Okay, so once this fluid comes out, this fluid is now termed as the tissue fluid. So the fluid that comes out, because this is how exchange of material occurs between the capillary and the cells. So as the fluid comes out from the fluid is a plasma with dissolved substances like glucose, oxygen. So when the fluid comes out of this blood capillary, this forms the tissue fluid which fills up the spaces in between the cells. Now all exchange of material between the blood and the cells will occur through this tissue fluid. Means what? It means that the glucose, the oxygen which has come out, glucose by active transportation or oxygen by diffusion that has come out into the tissue region now from the tissue fluid will diffuse into the cells where they are assimilated. At the same time, the cells are also going to release waste materials. So waste and like carbon dioxide and nitrogenous waste at the same time will be released by the cells into the tissue. Now this is how exchange of material occurs. Most of the tissue fluid drains back into the blood capillary. It's not that continuously the fluid or the plasma will continuously ooze out and remain in this particular region. Most of it, more than 90% of this tissue fluid will be draining back into the capillary, and from here these will be taken to the heart. So the capillary will join the vein, and then this blood is taken to the heart and further it is circulated. So more than 90% of the tissue fluid will drain back into the capillary, but some remains. Okay, some of them, like it will be less than 5% or so of the tissue fluid that remains. And what remains in this region, this is actually rich in waste materials. So the fluid that is remaining, that remains, that cannot go back into the capillary, this fluid that remains, this fluid will be rich in carbon dioxide, it will be rich in waste material, and this fluid also will be having some macromolecules which are released by the cell. So those macromolecules, larger molecules which cannot drain into the capillary, will remain in this. Now this again has to be returned back into the blood. So how it is returned, let us see. Now what you find is that the tissue fluid that remains, that cannot go into the capillary, drains into the lymph capillary. So the tissue fluid that cannot drain into the blood capillary drains into the lymph capillary. Okay, with waste materials, with carbon dioxide and macromolecules. Reason is that the pores in the lymph capillaries are a bit larger than that of the blood capillary, and the moment this fluid, that is the tissue fluid, goes into the lymph capillary, this is now referred to as lymph. That is why I said you that lymph is a fluid connective tissue having the same composition as the blood plasma, but it lacks certain plasma proteins. So it's almost the same composition. It's straw yellow colored, having the same composition as plasma, but it lacks certain plasma proteins, and it is rich in carbon dioxide and the other waste material. So it has got higher content of these things. Now once this lymph enters the lymph capillaries, now from here the lymph is drained into the lymph vessel, and from the lymph vessel it is drained into the vein. I had told you that all the lymph vessels, they finally join. Look at this diagram. The lymph vessels finally join the blood vessel, that is the vein. There's a vein which is present in the region of heart. This vein that you see is called as a subclavian vein. So all these lymph vessels with the lymph which has been collected is going to be drained back into the blood. Okay, so this is how the lymph is formed. Functions of lymphatic system or the lymph. The most important function of the lymphatic system is transports the fluids back into the blood. The tissue fluid, just now I've said you that how the tissue fluid which could not go back into the blood capillary is drained into the lymph capillary and the lymph vessel, and then it is termed as lymph, and this fluid finally is going to be drained back into the blood. This is a very important role of this lymph. Now the other important function of the lymph is that it plays an essential role in the body defense and resistance to diseases. Your lymphatic system or the lymph has got special white blood cells called as the lymphocytes, which provide immunity to the body. Those lymphocytes help in protecting you from infection. So that's another important function of the lymph. And the third important function is that the lymph capillaries which are present in the villi. Try to recall, I've discussed about villi in the topic of human digestive system. So villi are the finger-like projections. So the villi, apart from having the blood capillary, also has a lymph capillary. So this lymph capillary, which is present in the villi of small intestine, they absorb the digested fat. Okay, they will absorb the digested fat and finally transport it back to the blood. So based on the topic of transportation in animals, here are some questions. You can take these questions and then answer the same in your bio copies. The first question is, describe the internal structure of heart, write the significance of walls, and why are the ventricles of heart thick walled when compared to the atria. The next question is, how the circulation of blood in fishes is different from that of us. Third, differentiate between arteries and veins. Differentiate between arteries and veins. Next, what are the important functions of lymph and why are arteries thick walled when compared to veins? So why do arteries have thick wall than the veins? These are the questions that are to be answered in bio copy.